All right, and we're live with Jim Crowell. Jim, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Eric, man. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be good.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, just to set expectation, Jim's going to give us um, the funnel hack that will get you to six figures in 6 weeks with online coaching. So,
Oh yeah,
go.
that's exactly my style of business. So for everybody on this call, I'm a compounding guy. So I'm a big win in the long run type of guy. That doesn't mean I don't like to win fast, but um, six figures in 6 days is not my shtick.
Yeah. And if it is, if you're looking to somebody who promises that, run away, run for the hills. So, Jim, tell everyone who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of OPEX Fitness and Big Dawgs, and I'm on the board of the Brand X method. And really, to kind of put everything in perspective, is I'm similar to most everybody watching this. Is that I'm a voracious learner. I want to really understand this thing called fitness business because I find it fascinating. So I love to investigate lots of different components of it. As Ken would say, right? Like sometimes I go too much into the weakness side just because I'm fascinated to learn it, but I've really been focusing on building strength like everybody else. And so I guess my strengths would lie a lot on the strategic side of things. And I've also had my feet in the flames, meaning I've owned gyms, I've coached people, I've done personal training, CrossFit, the whole 9 yards. I was an athlete in college and then a CrossFit Games athlete. And so I have some pretty unique experiences that help me connect better with business owners and coaches.
Yeah. You live and breathe it, that's for sure. And you had, where were your gyms? Was it Pennsylvania?
Yeah, we were in
Yeah,
Pittsburgh at a couple of
Pittsburgh.
big CrossFit gyms back in the day. I actually just talked to a couple of buddies of mine who were coaches for those gyms, and they own their own gym now. So it's kind of cool to see the evolution of how things continue to move.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Let's talk about online coaching. So there's obviously, it's a big draw, right? I mean, you can do it from anywhere. You can leverage your time more effectively, right? You can work with maybe a wider breadth of clientele. What do people not know when they look at that? It's sexy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's sexy. It really is, and I know there's OPEX coaches who make, $80,000 plus and can live anywhere in the world. Right. So it's true. Like you really can. And, but what are the benefits of doing it? And let's kind of look from, I mean, we always like avatars, right? Maybe for this group as a gym owner who wants to start an online revenue stream at their gym, or kind of get the one that's not really working too well going.
Yeah, there are so many ways we can maneuver this conversation, and I'm not actually sure which way we'll end up going, but let me try to give a little bit of context for people right now. And it's not positive or negative, it's just context. Remote coaching, I think, has become so popular because of the low barrier of entry. And what I mean by that is you don't need a facility, you don't need a degree, you don't need credentials, and you really don't need cash, right? It's like if I can pay $15 a month for the trial version of True Coach, I can start. And I think that people see that on the cost side, and then they contrast it with the upside of, well, I can work with anybody. Like I can go speak to anybody and I can be an influencer and I'll just have this client funnel come into me because it's like there's billions and billions of people out there. How can't I have 40 clients? And so those two things I think have made it really interesting for people. The flip side of that argument, though, is that whenever anything has low barrier of entry, that means that the market will get flooded. And that means that you will have to create and maintain a competitive advantage to other people in the market to get the same clients that they're going after. Because what people forget is that the right client for, let's just call it individual design online, is not everybody, right? Like there's a lot of people who are very poor online clients, and coaches need to recognize that. So the pool's getting smaller of clients. It's not getting smaller, but you have to condense down the number of people that you can coach, while that market of coaches is getting freaking huge of people offering this thing. So if you don't differentiate and build competitive advantage, it's just going to be like, anything else that has no barrier. It's just a full commodity, right? So I want to say that you can do very well in it, but you have to build a brand and you have to build credibility in results of your clients. And you then have to turn all of that into an online brand. You have no choice, right? And so what people need to recognize as well is that it's easy to get 10 clients. Easy, because you have friends and family, right? It's very different to build a sustainable, growable online coaching business. Very different. And I think that people need to recognize that. So your first question was, well, what could a gym owner maybe do to add an online revenue stream? Frankly, it's fucking easy. You just get TrueCoach and bill them through your gym's, billing software. And you can, if a client moves away and they love you and they want to do individual training, which by the way, most of them would have been doing group before, so let's not get into that conversation yet. But if they want to do individual coaching, you now have a way of doing that. But here we go down the next rabbit hole. I think that most coaches who haven't experienced one-to-one program design need to experience it first. Because a lot of coaches getting started in one-to-one takes them 60 minutes to write a weekly program. That is brutal to take that long for one weekly program, but it's reality. So if you're going to build a remote coaching system, and let's say that you do have this big influential brand and you can put 30 clients in right away, you're talking about 30 hours a week to write a weekly program. And you have no systems in place to retain your people. You haven't consulted with them at all. You haven't answered any of their questions or comments online. And 30 clients to build a growable business, that's not growable, right? Like that's just potentially comfortable depending on what your price point is. So I think we have to break this thing into kind of two buckets. Are you trying to do it for a little bit of extra revenue? That's one completely separate conversation. Or are you trying to grow a business that might support you and a family and possibly other coaches? That's a completely different conversation. And so depending on kind of where you want to go, we can maybe hit on both. But those are, it's just a completely different game.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a really good point because it is completely two different avatars that we're talking about. And it was not, when I started, went through the OPEX training, started working with James, and I think it's critical, a point that I want to emphasize that you mentioned in there too, is like, if you want to be an online coach, hire an online coach, because you're going to understand, you're going to start to understand from the client side what it's like, what the systems look like, what the needs are, how they facilitate consultations, like all of the rhythm of it is really important. It did not take me long to get to 10 clients. It was super easy. Eventually, I think I was personally up to 20, 25. And then I was, what I didn't realize is like, okay, well, I'm going to start doing my programming on Sundays.
Yeah.
Next thing, at first it was like, cool, get up at 6 a.m., cup of coffee, an hour. Next thing you know, it was like all day until 2 p.m. My wife was like, what are you doing? Right.
Yeah.
But I also started to see that some months I'm like, wow, I actually made more money in the online and individual design clientele than I did through my gym, in the slower months. So that was a big eye opener too, because I started looking at margins, started looking at things, you start to really think of things critically. I have a question for you because, and I don't want to get too off base here, but you say brand, right? And building an online brand. Define brand in your mind, because I think that's a very blasé term, right? Like people just kind of throw it out there. Be a brand. What does that mean?
It's a great question. So let me give two examples. One brand is the gym owner who has this separate thing on the side that they do remote coaching. The other brand is Marcus Philly. So it's like, oof, anybody who's seen or heard Marcus Philly is like, yeah, Marcus, I totally understand. Whereas they have no concept or picture in their mind of who this gym owner is who's offering, remote coaching online. If you don't know Marcus, I think he's got 400,000 followers. He's been to the CrossFit Games. He has Revival Strength, which has multiple online coaches, right? Like he's a brand. Okay. Marcus has built his brand. So if we kind of take a layer under that, brand is what the market perceives you to be. That's my definition of brand. So when I'm saying you have to build a brand, you need to build out that picture so that the market perceives you to be that person or that group of people. So for us, right, like we've got Big Dawgs Coaching. We've built that out as a brand for serious people to get better at fitness. You know, it's like we couldn't do people who have never trained before with the name Big Dawgs, right? Like it would make no sense, right? And so when you're building out your brand, you have to take into account all those things that your potential clients are going to see into account. That means that the imagery that you post, the videos that you post, the words that you use, everything either builds you into the brand that you want them to see you as, or it detracts from it. And so if somebody wants to go online and build a brand, they have to be able to be big enough to speak to enough people to have a consistent sales funnel of clients. Because again, I generally think about this as a business, not as a side hustle. Now I think it's great conversation to say, if you want to start remote coaching on the side and then build it, organically, I think that can be done, and this is a great conversation. But to do it as a full-on business at 50 clients, okay, I generally would like a remote coach's retention to be 94, 95% per month, okay? So if you've got 50 clients, you know that you're going to lose 2 or 3 clients a month. So you got to replace them every single month. So this whole concept of like, I'm just going to get 15 clients and I'm going to do no marketing, it's like, no. That just simply doesn't work if you're going to do this for a full-time gig. And the brand image, or what people perceive you to be, has to be effective enough with the systems and funnels and to ultimately drive clients through to become your clients.
Awesome. So let's go to the first avatar, right? Gym owner who maybe wants to get their first, 10 additional online clients. What, besides hiring an online coach, right? I think that's step one, which is, very well qualified. What would be the next steps? What kind of systems are we looking at? How do we start outreach? How do we create value for these people? How do we differentiate? What are ways to do that? Do we niche? Do we not niche? Right? Niche, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
What do we do?
I'm gonna try to bullet this, and I don't love bulleting on these conversations. So if I need to expand, just stop me and I will.
Yep.
But systems wise, you have to have a good programming platform. We love True Coach. It's really good. And the client has a good experience. There's an Apple app, the whole 9 yards. So I would recommend using that. They're going to have payments shortly. So you won't even need a billing system shortly if you have True Coach. You also need a website. Now, I get the concept of, well, why would I need a website if I've got social media? You still need to sell, and it's very difficult to sell services through social media. So a website is extremely beneficial. Can you put that onto a billing system like MindBody, Yes, technically, but it looks like shit, so your brand's not going to look very good. You need to make sure that you have a very clear customer experience blueprint. And to not go too deep into this, you need to know how every single client should be taken care of every single day that they're with you. And by the way, some of those days mean no touches as a coach, right? But you need to know that, right? So if you're going to send programming out, what does it look like, and when and how do you send that programming out? If you're going to communicate with them, how are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? If you're going to watch videos or ask them for videos, same idea. How, where, when, all that good stuff. You have to lay out a very strategic and specific experience that you're going to have. One of the things that we do at Big Dawgs, which is extremely important to us, is we do a monthly consultation face-to-face on Zoom. We know for sure that that is an indicator of if they're going to stay inside as a client or not. If they start, for whatever reason, not showing up to consults, we know that that's a red flag. But because that's part of our, that's part of what we want a client to go through.
Yep.
You have to lay out that entire experience because that informs the processes that you're going to run as a coach. So if you need to send out programming every day, you either need to write an entire week, to your point, on a Sunday, right? And then it just sends out automatically through True Coach every day. Well, let me just say this. Don't fucking program one day's workout. That is recipe for disaster for a coach. It just don't do it. You got to do at least a week. I like a week if you have written a larger split or training phase for a client, just because you have something bigger to go off of. But the week allows you to stay focused on what you're progressing, but also be nimble enough if they have results that would reflect a change in the program. Once you have the experience, then you have to lay out your process for how you're going to do it. Once you have your process for how you're going to execute on it, you really need to think about how you're going to measure it. So True Coach is great for client results, but you need to measure things like retention and financial metrics and all that stuff. So that gets into systems like QuickBooks to measure your accounting and all that stuff. If they're a gym owner, they should have all that in play, but I know most gym owners don't do it. So you got to make sure that you're checking financials and metrics, particularly retention. If you're coming from a group training system and you haven't tracked your individual retention, this is going to be an eye-opener for you. And you have to track it, and you have to do things like exit interviews to understand why people leave, which they will. And I just wrote a long-ass blog on this concept of retention, but you basically run into 3 types of retention pieces. Retention that you can control, i.e. the experience and how effectively you deliver it. Retention that you're kind of in control of, like, let's say that you give a workout and somebody happens to roll their ankle and they're injured for a month. It's like you're kind of in control of that, but not fully. And then the stuff that you have no control over. So let's say that somebody has a death in the family and they can't train anymore for whatever reason, right? Like,
yep.
So what you need to measure and strategically improve are the things that you can control about the experience that you're offering. Because the better the experience is, let's go right back to brand, the better your clients are going to speak publicly about you to their friends, which builds your brand. So that to me is kind of like, broadly speaking, what somebody would need to do. If we're asking niche versus a wide market, I'm much more of a fan of a niche market when it comes to remote coaching. So what experiences do you have as a coach? What are you really good at? What are you highly capable, competent, confident in delivering? So for example, like, I was a remote coach for a little while for CrossFitters, right? I owned CrossFit gyms. I was a CrossFit Games competitor, I was credible in that arena. But if I were to be asked to train NASCAR drivers, it's like, I don't know that world. You know what I mean? And I'm not known in that world. So it's much harder and more expensive to go acquire clients from that world because I have no entry point into it. So I much prefer a niche audience versus a wide one. And I think that when you start thinking about a content strategy and a marketing strategy, to turn it into a business, it's much more simple when you have a specific client in mind of who you want to serve. And in today's landscape of the exact words that you say really, really matter, if you're trying to speak to everybody, you speak to nobody. We're in a polarized world. You can either accept it or, not see it. But if you could say something, let's look at Mueller, right? We had the Mueller, thing yesterday on Capitol Hill. Half of America thinks he's the greatest guy on the planet and Trump's going to jail. The other half thinks that he's a prick and Trump should be exonerated. It's like, I don't know how people have that divergent of a view from the same words, but they do, right? So you got to develop an audience that you can speak very effectively and specifically to.
Yeah. Awesome. And I do agree with a niche. And a great example is I was talking to a young woman who retired from the police force and she wanted to get into online coaching. And she's like, well, I'm going to start working with busy women in their 40s. I'm like, that's too wide. Right. I'm like, well, what about female police officers? She's like, what do you mean? It's right there. Like, don't you know 10? She's like, yeah, I definitely do. Can you help them? Yes, I can. Well, great. There it is. There's your niche, right? Run with it. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to look too far. Generally, it's probably the most obvious thing that you have. I mean, if it was me, if I was going to start online coaching again, I would probably go to either busy entrepreneurs, right?
Yep.
Or water polo players, because I know those worlds, right? Those are 2 worlds that I came from and easy niches. So I think, your niche is not that far away. Now with the gym owner circumstance, and I have a bunch of questions to follow up with you too on all of that. But I would imagine a great place to start is people who have moved out of town.
For sure. So
right?
if we're talking
lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah. If we're talking about building the first 10, I'm going to keep saying it so that anybody listening to this call fully believes it. It's easy to put the first 10 in. You just have to know that. It's just about a little bit of work to do it. So if you're a gym owner, you should have an email list of anybody who's ever been a client, anybody who's ever opted in, anybody you've met at an event, wherever. That's the first place that you go, because your family and friends are clearly going to be on that email list, right? And you should, in my mind, you should lay out 4 or 5 unique emails based on the bucketed types of people to email them out, call it a founding member, whatever we're going to call it, rate to start coaching. So if you have family, that's a pretty personal message, talking about, hey, I'm into this new thing. I really think that I can help you. Doesn't matter that you're not here anymore. I've got a way to deliver it. It's like, oh, cool. Same thing with friends, same thing with former clients, same thing with people who never became your clients. Like, those essentially are the buckets. I don't like one mass message because it's not personal enough, and the world is getting more and more personal again, even online. So I think as long as you have a specific message that you send out, that alone should generate 5 or 10 clients. What would I do on top of that? I'd call them all.
Yes.
Like all of them. And if you're not willing to do that, get the fuck out of the business world. You have no clients. Don't tell me you're busy.
Yeah.
So I just think that little things like that go a heck of a long ways. I get that lots of people aren't going to answer their phone. I get it. Maybe send a text first and then call them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think that there's, in the fitness world, it's so interesting. Like, everybody wants to be a millionaire tomorrow, and most of them aren't willing to do nearly the work that it takes. But to get those first 10, honestly, you shouldn't need to do a heck of a lot more than that if you're an existing gym owner, because you have relationships with a lot of people already.
Yeah. And I agree. I think nowadays, if people, I always urge people, like, just focus on the conversations. How many conversations are you actually having? It's so easy nowadays in the online world, just sit behind your computer. But I produced 3 new online products, and I have a course, and I have this and all this. But your bank account's empty.
Right. Yeah.
So get on the phone and start talking to people, find out what they need, see what their pain is, do the needs analysis, go through the time. And if you can truly help them, then you offer to help them. Right. Yep. And if the problem is expensive enough, they'll pay for it. That's it. And if they trust you too. I think there's an interesting point of what I noticed too in the online programming world was that, and this was my own experience and the evolution thereof, is that we always feel like we have to recreate a whole new week of programming every week, right? Like, I got to wow them this week with something new and fresh because that's my brand. That's what it's all about. It's completely unnecessary if you are communicating the why to your client. Like, okay, you know what? We are going to stick to the same template this week. We're going to make a few tweaks, but here's why, right? I didn't see the progression I wanted here. This is the end goal. Once we get to this, then we're going to switch it up. And I think no matter whether you're coaching people in class, online, I think it's more important online to really start communicating why you're doing things and why it should be important to them. Not from a technical aspect of like, anaerobic systems and, all of that, right? They don't care.
No.
All they want to know is about, like, why am I doing this? How is it getting closer to the goals that I've established with you as my coach? And keep communicating that as much as possible, because the struggle with the online is you're not there. So the communication you do get needs to be highly valuable and very pointed and understood, right?
So, yeah, that makes me think of 2 things just immediately. Number one, I see that, because we've got OPEX gyms all over the world now, and we've just learned a lot about the type of people who are great at delivering personalized fitness, the type of people who are not. And something that I find a lot is that a lot of people who did group training, particularly CrossFit, their clients, those are the clients that are unwilling or disinterested in a less sexy program. Whereas when we go to the personal training world, they're just like, great, got my program. It's like, it's fascinating how different the mindset is. So I don't know if you've noticed it recently, Eric, but we're much more closely aligning and anchoring to personal training on the OPEX side, because those clients are way more aligned with what we're delivering, way more. And then the second part is, it goes back to brand, right? Like, you mentioned that you have to tell folks why you're doing what you're doing. Couldn't agree more with that. I think that people need to take that concept and go to the public with it. Now I fully understand that we're in the fitness world and there's got to be, bright lights and colors and all that stuff. That's all part of the game. But I think that you need to tell people before they start what they're getting and what they're going to expect and what their training program is going to look like, because what they're ultimately after are results. Now, if you're trying to score a clientele that's basically coming off the couch who's never worked before, to be frank, I think that's a bad remote coaching audience. I really do, because they generally need more support, more in-person touch points. And we've just seen some folks that are just really bad fits for it. Doesn't mean that somebody coming off the couch can't do it, but if they've never been motivated before, you're telling me that through a screen or through a platform, you're going to motivate them for the first time? And no, I'm not trying to like masculinely challenge the people on this call, right? Like, I just think it's a bad audience that you're going to burn a lot of time and energy on. If you want to do that live. You can do really well with them live.
And it goes back to who your avatar is. I mean, for some, and this is a huge point of conversation, but the fitness industry has made things overcomplicated because of who we are, right? Well, we have to feel like we are necessary in the environment for people to be healthy. And it's not necessarily true. I mean, if you can Max Schenk, I don't know if you know who that guy is, but he's got a great analogy of like, well, first of all, are you healthy as a plant? Do you get enough sun and water every day, right? Next thing, are you healthy as a dog? You get sun, water, and a walk, right? And then, are you healthy as a monkey? Do you get all those things and do you swing around and play every day, right? And then you start looking at like, well, how complicated have we made things as far as fitness goes? And I think, that's a whole nother subject of conversation, but we tend to push that on our clients, like our need to be, the experts, when really, if we simplify it and we set the expectations up front. And this was something working with James Fitzgerald back in like whatever it was, 2013. I felt that he did very well was he set expectations like, listen, we're going to work on a 9-month stint, right? And the first few months are going to be us just kind of figuring things out and maybe figuring out you. But a good program is not judged in 6 weeks. It's judged in 6 months. So we need to look at that. And I think one of his greatest quotes is, it still takes 9 months to make a baby. Human physiology hasn't changed, right? Everything else has changed, but human physiology is the same. And I think setting expectations up front of being a proper communicator will save you a lot of time, energy, and money going down the road as far as retention, because you can always refer back to that conversation. Be like, hey, remember on January 1st when we talked about expectations? Like, well, here we are, right?
Yes, exactly.
So stick to it.
And I think that, let's just go back to the measurement of it all. Retention, if you improve that, it just costs you less money to acquire new clients. So that's such a big important part from an outcome standpoint. I think maybe what's led us, meaning all fitness trainers and coaches, down this potentially catastrophic road is really marketing, right? So if we are trying to acquire new clients and we're trying to be different, right? Because all marketing says we got to be different. By the way, I fully believe that, right? So they're right. What it so often comes down to is, and Oren Clef in the book Pitch Anything talked about this a lot, but he goes, you have to build status, right? So you have to stand out, and status is what stands you out. And the 3 things that build status, generally, money, popularity, and power, right? So if we come back to this idea of status, coaches don't have it. Let's just be honest, right? Like, we're not doctors, we're not Wall Street guys, we're coaches, right? So we don't get blessed with status just because we're a coach. So I think that so many coaches have tried so hard to develop status that they've made it really complicated, because when people don't fully understand what they're saying, some audiences give them credibility and status because they're like, fuck, you sound really smart, and I'm just going to kind of do this because you're really smart. And then to your point, what does the program really need to do? Chew your food and go walk. Like
sleep 7 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, and that's, again, to go back to your target market piece, that's why it's so important to know who you're going after. Because if you want to write more complex programs to get people capable of doing specific things, i.e. winning in fitness, doing X amount of pull-ups, running Spartan races, whatever, the program's got to get a little bit more complex because they have more specific goals. But if you want to coach somebody and have them be super healthy for a really long time, weight training, easy aerobic work, eat food, sleep, low stress.
Yeah.
It's like, that's coaching. But what is the beauty of coaching? It's getting people to develop the habits to do that every day for the rest of their life. That's where it gets hard. And then, to come back to our remote coaching conversation, a lot of coaches don't know how to deliver that effectively remotely. That's, again, why I come back to our consultations on the Big Dog side are critically important. Critically. Because as important as the program is, it's more important about the support system and the relationships, because that develops better perceptions and better, let's just call it, inspiring moments for clients to go about this for years and years and years. The byproduct of doing those for us as a business is better retention. But the byproduct for the client of doing those is better results. Doesn't need to be super complicated, but the coach has to be willing and able to build that a level of trust. And once they have the trust, they have to consistently help them just take step by step by step by step by step. And that's why the program shouldn't look overly chaotic, is because it doesn't give you the best results.
Yeah. And I think if we can boil it down to what's the most important things, right?
Yeah.
Systems, not hard to find. Get a true coach. There's a bunch of others out there. You got your billing, right? If you have a gym, you have a website, just add a landing page to it to describe what the service is and how to schedule a call, right? Or even have people apply, right? Self-selecting is huge. The art of the consultation, I think, is everything. I think it's where 80% of it happens, because we all know, like, writing a program is great. It's fucking worthless if people don't understand why they're doing it, nor are they motivated to do it, or they just don't do it.
For sure.
Right? And that's where the magic happens, is in the one-on-one calls, seeing their face, seeing the response to the questions that come through. You know what? That's not any different than regular coaching, face-to-face. It's just done over video. So if you're a great coach, right, then you'll be good at online.
And let's come back to my first kind of contextual point, is that a lot of coaches are doing online coaching not because they want to deliver a better service, but because they want to get rich and have freedom.
Yeah.
Fuck that if I'm a client. Think, like, a lot of coaches need to hear that, because, for example, our coaches at Big Dawgs, they love doing what they do. They love it. They love helping clients. If they're really good at it, which obviously we hopefully don't hire folks who aren't really good at it, but then more money comes, more freedom can come, but they're still writing programs, doing consults, and coaching clients. So I love the concept of people wanting to make more money. I'm all for it. But if you're going to build a business that's going to have longevity, you need to do it with a service that is beneficial to the end consumer, because they won't stay with you otherwise. If they sense that this guy is just coaching me so that he can go do a tour of, Europe every 6 months, it's like, why would I want that guy to coach me? Because, and this is why a lot of the, influencers out there, they have early success, but they can't keep people retained, is because their service offering isn't very good. So it's like, oh, I want that guy's life. That guy's got an amazing life. I'm going to get coached by that guy. And then 3 months in, they're like, why am I being coached by this guy? Like, he doesn't pay attention to me.
Yeah.
So, and I get it, right? Like, there's a huge emphasis on marketing, and being an influencer is incredibly valuable, incredibly. Sure. But you got to follow it up with the right service offering for the right group of people.
Awesome, man. Well, believe it or not, we just filled up 35 minutes.
Oh, wow. We could have a lot of fun with this.
Yeah. Well, this is great, man. I think there's going to be a lot of questions. I'll post it in the group, and if people have anything, they know where to get you here. But if people want to just give us a quick thing, if people want to get a hold of you, where do they find you? Yeah,
the best is just email me. I'm just jim@opexfit.com. So OPEXFIT.com. Happy to answer any emails. I'm fairly active in the Slack, so I'm happy to try to answer questions if I can. Right on, but best of luck to everybody. It's a cool business. You just got to do it for the right reasons and put the systems in play.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, thanks, Jim. Great talk as always.
All right, man. See ya.